Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time and has been since I was a little kid. No matter how old I am, if you tell me that there's a new Spider-Man movie coming out, I will be excited for it and I will watch it. Spider-Man and Peter Parker mean so much to me and have shaped my personal journey in various ways. I have made a video on that so you can check it out. And Spider Man Into the Spider Verse was a big surprise for me when I first saw it in theaters. That movie changed everything. And we have had to wait 5 years for the sequel, and it's been a long time coming, but I am so glad that it's finally here. And I've seen a trailer or two, but I've mostly been avoiding the recent trailers and TV spots because I want to witness all this on an IMAX screen first. And since Across the Spider Verse is my most anticipated movie of 2023, I came prepared. Over the last few days, I had a Spider Man movie marathon where I watched all the Spider Man movies, starting from Raimi's trilogy to Spider Verse. There were masterpieces, there were good films, and maybe even a few bad ones, but at the end of the day, especially after the marathon, I felt connected to Peter Parker even more. No matter which actor he's played by or animated and voice acted by, the universal struggle of Peter Parker remains the same. He is someone trying to make ends meet, trying to balance his personal and superhero life, but always has to face the consequences of that struggle and ends up losing someone close and important to them. And it's the pain of these losses that helps them come out stronger in the end, that further goes on to define the kind of person they choose to be. That is Spider Man to me. And since it's still Phil Lord and Chris Miller helming this project, I just know that Spider Man Across the Spider Verse will be a great movie, but I'm even more sure that it will be a fantastic Spider Man movie. So, let's see how it goes.
ಜೊತೆ ನೀಡಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್.
Bro, what are you doing? They did it. They actually did it. And I knew they would do it. We have got ourselves yet another great Spider Man movie, and I could not be happier. As a big fan of this character, I am so satisfied that they have actually done it again. Mind you, this review contains spoilers for the film, so consider this a spoiler warning. This movie gets the entire concept of Spider Man and what makes the character work. We see our protagonist Miles and how he has gotten used to being Spider Man now that he's donned the mask for about a year and a half. But I love that we see Miles having to balance his normal life with the life of being a superhero. He has responsibilities outside of being a superhero and struggles to juggle both lives. He's not in time for when his parents need him, but that's also because trouble calls whenever he's needed. Miles' parents are worried about their son. They think that he's unsure about his future. They think he's irresponsible, but they don't know the truth. Spider Man is a relatable character, but he has never felt this relatable to me. We understand the perspectives of both sides. Miles has had enough of his parents constantly pressuring him and seemingly taking ownership of his life. He badly just wants to tell them the truth so that everything makes sense. His apparent irresponsibility has a reason behind it, but he's also afraid that it could put them in danger. He fears that they might not love him the same.
But Miles is like he's growing up, he even looks older in this picture, right? And so the family are having to navigate that, right? Like when your kid grows up, like you have to grow up too a little bit. You have to your relationship evolves. And as long as that family love each other so much. So they want to figure it out, they just don't totally know how yet.
But we also understand Jefferson's and Rio's perspective. They are just looking out for what's best for their son, but they can't seem to understand him. They don't know what's going on with him. They want to know the truth. They want Miles to be honest with them, but he's not opening up to them. They don't know why, but they can't know. We even get to see a lot more about Gwen in the opening of the film. She knows the consequences of making meaningful relationships in this line of work, which is why she has no friends. She actively avoids making any friendships because of what happened to the one friend she had, Peter, who died right in her arms. Her father's a cop, one with a vengeance against Spider Woman, not knowing that it's his own daughter. Gwen not only struggles with the loneliness that's the product of being a superhero, but also struggles to connect with her father, who she also hides an important truth from. If this entire story was just in one movie, they probably would have cut all these scenes short, because there's a lot more that happens in the movie. But because it's split into two parts, the film really spends a lot of its runtime on fleshing out the lives and problems of Miles and Gwen. And I loved that because it adds on to what happens later in the film while also developing their budding romance. But all of this gets to the core of Spider Man, someone whose life isn't made easier by getting powers. Instead, it only gets more difficult as they try to balance their double lives, often facing consequences as a result of the choices they make because of the struggle to juggle these two lives. You get lots of brilliantly animated action set pieces with tons of charming supporting characters. Pavitra Prabhakar and Hobie were standouts. The whole Mumbattan sequence was an absolute blast. Being an Indian myself, the jokes were hilarious. The chai tea and traffic bits got the whole theatre laughing. And this film is extremely funny. The jokes are very well written and are cleverly timed. And also, I just realized that Hobie was voiced by Daniel Kaluuya, which only makes me love him even more. Spot is the antagonist of the film, but really begins to feel like a strong force of nature towards the latter part of the film. For the most part, he's a joke, and his superpower of making interdimensional portals is creatively used for the action sequences, but he has a connection to Spider Man that elevates him from being a villain of the week. And I love the fact that he's the guy Miles threw a bagel at in the last movie, and now he's the main baddie of this movie. He essentially created Spider Man through the radioactive spider that bit him, and Spider Man created Spot as he was there when Miles blew up Kingpin's collider at the end of the previous movie. There's beautiful poetry as to how the hero and villain were responsible for creating each other. But Spot lost everything due to this, whereas Spider Man became a hero, loved by everyone. Which is why Spot is dead set on ensuring that Miles faces what he went through. And that's understandable. We empathize with Spot and his motivation, though he's not too heavily featured in this movie. But one of my favorite reveals happens in the second half of the film, where Miles comes to the realization that his father is fated to die and that he can't stop it. The story of every Spider Man follows certain familiar beats, one of them being the death of a loved one, mostly an uncle, and the death of a police captain. The film pays homage to the comics and almost every Spider Man tale, making the repetition of these familiar beats the canon that can't be tampered with. Everything happening in the multiverse has to follow these beats to maintain canon continuity, and if these chain of events are broken, this could potentially prove to be fatal for the fate of the multiverse. These are the external consequences. Me personally, I don't care if the multiverse ends. We have seen countless end of the world and end of the universe stories, but none of it feels resonant in any way. Spider Man Across the Spider Verse knows this, and so it does something genius. It does this one thing that makes me care about this external consequence of the potential end of the multiverse. It makes it personal. Miles' dad's death is canon. Miles has the chance to prevent this, but if he does, this could mean the end of the multiverse. By making it personal, you give the protagonist a difficult moral choice to make, one that gives us insight into the kind of person he is. He chooses to save his father, and because we spent the opening of the movie with Miles' family and grew to care more about them, we are emotionally invested in Miles' moral dilemma.
Miles, there's chapters that are a part of every spider story every time. You have a choice between saving one person and saving an entire world.
Being Spider Man is a sacrifice. You get cool superpowers, sure, but you're also going to suffer a lot of loss and pain. As I mentioned in the opening of the video, choosing to be Spider Man is choosing a life of responsibility, a life of pain and suffering that will follow. That's the job, that's what one signs up for. Miles chooses to save his dad, but that also has its problems as Miguel and every other spider variation is out to get Miles. Miguel reveals to Miles that the spider that bit him was from a different universe, a universe that is left Spider Man less because that spider bit Miles, who's from a different universe. Miguel blames Miles for this and calls him a mistake, an anomaly. as the one who's responsible for the universe without a Spider-Man, as the one who's responsible for the death of the Spider-Man in his universe. He taps into Miles' greatest insecurities to try and break him from the inside. But Miles is able to grow into a better person, not letting anyone tell him what his story should be, using his mother's words of encouragement to gather the strength he needs to get out of a fix. But knowing that this is part one of a complete story, I knew this would end on a cliffhanger, which it did. The story goes to unexpected places and makes these big and bold choices that I really respect. You really do not know what might happen because you know that this isn't a film that follows conventional, traditional beats one expects to see. The makers are not afraid to kill off an important character or make daring creative choices. And it feels great to see a superhero movie with real, palpable stakes like this. I really cannot wait to see what happens in part 2 with great setting up of the plot and characters. I'm really invested in this narrative and I want to see how everything unfolds and concludes. This film gives you an experience like no other, especially seeing it in IMAX. The symphony of light, colors, and sound all come together perfectly to deliver to you an unforgettable cinematic experience. The animation of the first film blew me away, but somehow they stepped up their game in the sequel by going even wilder and even more balls to the wall with the animation, having multiple different unique art styles for every universe. Gwen's universe has a watercolor texture with constantly changing backgrounds reflecting the emotional state of the characters, whereas Miles' universe has the familiar art style resembling a comic book. The artistry on display here is nothing short of outstanding. Every single frame is filled with so much passion, thought, and precision. The camera goes all out during the action sequences, emphasizing the impact of everything you see on screen. The filmmaking is outstanding. The filmmakers here are really on top of their game. This film is a triumph for animation. They really have outdone themselves. Even the brilliant voice actors who are perfectly suited to play these characters do an amazing job, along with Daniel Pemberton's score, which still gives me the chills I got with the previous film. I loved seeing Peter B. Parker again and how he's a father now, sharing the responsibilities of a parent, still supportive of Miles but being caught in this whole web of mess. I just loved seeing these characters I love and care about again. I really enjoyed the many Easter eggs and references, like the Venom universe, Donald Glover as the Prowler, replaying footage from The Amazing Spider Man, the old 66 Spidey, Spectacular Spider Man, Raimi's Spider Man. I mean, this movie is a treat for all Spider Man fans. I must have missed a lot more references than that, but these were just fun additional treats. My most anticipated movie of the year actually lived up to my expectations, and I personally could not be any happier. This film has been receiving exceptionally positive word of mouth, and I am so happy for everyone who has worked on this film because they actually deserve the love and praise that they have been receiving. The film has stayed with me since I left the theater, and I have not stopped thinking about it ever since, wanting to go back and watch this movie over and over again. Spider Man Across the Spider Verse is one of my favorite superhero movies ever made. It's easily one of the best Spider Man movies to have been made, and I am sure that the next part is going to be just as good, if not better.
And I, for one, can't wait to watch.
Thank you for watching.